Everyone, and good evening. My name is Henry Hutton. I'm with Publish and Sell Enterprises here in Raleigh, North Carolina. I've been in self-publishing going on around 8 years now. I started with a company called Lulu.com. We started that company in around 2001, 2002, and with Lulu, what we tried to do was really revolutionize the publishing world. Up until that time, if you wanted to get your book published, you either had to be picked up by a traditional publisher, which took a lot of time if it were to happen at all, and for so many authors it never did happen. And the other option was to self-publish using a vanity press that would take thousands of dollars of your hard-earned money to print you some copies of your book, hundreds if not thousands of copies for you to keep in your basement, and try to get you into some of the distribution outlets that they had that would get you into the major retailers. But really, you wouldn't make a lot of royalty on those types of books because all the middlemen would get all the money. So what we did with Lulu was try to create a site that was actually free to use. We wanted to lower the barriers to publishing for anyone and allow the marketplace to decide whether or not an author had talent and whether their book was viable in the book market. And the rest is history to some degree. Lulu now has over 1 million authors. It has some authors that are really selling a lot of books. Other companies other than Lulu have come on board in the last several years, Createspace being one of those, Wordclay, and some others as well that are competing in this space. And then there's the old standby, which is Lightning Source, which you may or may not have heard about, that is also a self-publishing company. But we're going to, in this session today, talk about a lot of the basic things that you should think about when you want to self-publish. And I'll be covering several slides here of what I consider to be the top 10 things that you should know about self-publishing. But truth be told, these slides change from presentation to presentation because things change quickly in this industry. And I'm always playing catch-up because just the industry is changing so quickly with new companies that are launching, new processes, whether they're online or offline, that are launching about whether it's publishing or marketing, and prices change a lot as well. So don't hesitate to ask any questions as I finish up each slide. And it looks like we only have about 4 or 5 people in with us tonight, so everybody should have time to ask a question if they have one. And as I go through this, when I say the top 10 things, it doesn't necessarily mean that number 1 is going to be more important than number 9 or number 10. All of these things are very important, and there are probably a couple other things that I'm not including, as I mentioned earlier, in these top 10. So don't hesitate to ask questions about anything that is confusing to you or anything that you think is missing from the discussion tonight. But we have an hour, and we should be able to make it through this fairly quickly. So when we talk about self-publishing, what I'd like to go through here at first are some of the basic questions that I usually am hit with when an author wants to consider self-publishing as an option. And this is either because they've been pursuing traditional publishing, maybe they've already had a traditional publishing contract in the past, or maybe they're changing self-publishing companies, and they want to see what the options are for them these days. And so here are what I consider some of the top topics that surround the aspects of self-publishing that you should think about. One is the upfront cost. And as I mentioned at the very beginning, there are companies out there that will allow you to pay over $2,000 to get your book self-published. They'll do almost all the work for you. They'll print you up 500 or 1,000 copies, but you give them a check for $2,600 and they'll publish your book for you. And then there are companies, as I mentioned earlier, like Lulu or Createspace or Wordclay, and others that we'll talk about, that will enable you to actually publish your book without spending any money at all. That's not necessarily a good thing, but at the same time, it goes into the choices that you have. Because if you don't do any work to make your book any good, and you just use one of these free sites, I've seen it too many times, where it actually hurts the author's reputation because the book shouldn't have been published to begin with because it wasn't ready to be published. Publishing automation. A lot of these companies are now going online. Lulu was one of the first ones. That was followed by Lightning Source. That was followed by CreateSpace and other companies now that allow anyone to go onto these sites and publish their book and finish with what we call a print-ready file that's ready to be sent to a printer to print for you or another buyer to buy. And this publishing automation allows for a lot of more of an economical scale that allows some of these companies, such as Lulu, to be of low or no cost to the author itself. Everything is automated, which is good and bad, because if you make some mistakes on your title page, for example, Lulu would never catch it. Other companies, such as Lightning Source or Word or CreateSpace, may in fact catch some of those things. Or if your book's just badly edited, some of these self-publishers will point that out to you, whereas companies, again, like Lulu or even CreateSpace, will not read your book, and they're not going to tell you if it's badly edited. Royalties. That's always a question that I get from authors, even before we get started. And every self-publishing company that I've seen pretty much has their own program of royalty payments. So when considering any company for self-publishing, be sure to look at their contractual obligations for royalties. And the same as with rights ownership. Rights ownership is a question I get asked all the time. And in truth, if this is your first book, everybody thinks that someone's going to want to steal their book. And in my experience, I've very rarely seen that, if ever. Maybe I can count on one hand the number of times I've seen rights become an issue with another author stealing another author's content. But in most cases, if you're not known at all, no one's really going to want your content. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't think about rights ownership, but other than just going to copyright.gov and working through the copyright ownership process that way, I don't think there's much more that you need to do. E-commerce options, I would say 80% of the authors that I work with want to sell their book online. Some authors don't. They want to carry their book with them because they're doing training, or it's some other type of brick-and-mortar distribution through churches or something like that, where they don't necessarily deal with e-commerce, online commerce, but most authors do. And so as a result, you will want to find out through the self-publisher that you're working with, what are your options there? Where will your book be available to be sold on their website or elsewhere? And that takes us to the next step, the retail distribution option. A lot of authors at least want to be into Amazon. They want to sometimes sell through their own website. They want to sell through Barnes & Noble and Borders, Books A Million, that type of thing. And if that's the case, you're going to go through a middleman, which we'll talk about a little bit later, which will get a little piece of your book's profits. But it can expand the number of what we call eyeballs that are looking at your book online. So it's something to think about when you're getting ready to self-publish. Fulfillment, time, shipping, I'm really going to not spend much time on that because it's getting so good these days. It's really not an issue. Print on demand, these days books get printed in 1 to 2 days. If you or one of your buyers is buying your book, say through Amazon or somewhere else, it's going to be printed in 1 or 2 days, and then the normal ship times of 2-day shipping, UPS ground, whatever is chosen by the buyer. Book quality is pretty consistent too these days. I'm really not seeing any problems. Well, I do see problems every now and then with several of the self-publishers that I use, but again, I would say it's less than 2%, which is generally acceptable for print on demand. Bookstores, authors always ask me, can they get their book into a physical bookstore? And that's what I mean when I'm saying bookstores here. a brick-and-mortar bookstore. And you can, but you're not going to make a lot of money that way. Don't expect to become successful by selling your book through the brick-and-mortar bookstores. It's just not going to happen. There's not enough money in it for you, nor is there really enough money in it for the bookstore owner. And they're going to even look for a way around it by maybe working with you directly. I'm working with a bookstore owner right now, as a matter of fact, who's writing a book. And he really knows this business about how to work with the various bookstores in his locality to make his book attractive to those bookstore owners, because that's the situation he's in every day. And then customer service. That can make a big difference depending on the help that you think you're going to need. And I'm going to tie that in here with publishing automation. If you do all the research and the homework and the learning that's necessary to publish your book on your own, I've known through Lulu hundreds of authors that have successfully used the Lulu site to publish their book for free and really never needed customer service. At the same time, there's customer service on the side of, if there's a problem with your printed book, that you want to make sure that you get a reply fairly quickly from whatever self-publisher that you're working with, whether you bought the book or whether one of your customers bought the book. It's very important that you get that resolved quickly for your reputation to maintain some credibility. So as an author, authors, they're constantly trying to deal with the customer service of a lot of these companies, and I'm not sure that I've seen customer service improve with some of these companies, because this is such a fast-growing industry. This whole self-publishing, the online self-publishing industry, is growing so quickly that a lot of these self-publishers are inundated by a lot of questions and complaints and issues by customers. And so just look online. You're probably familiar with just Predators and Editors, that site. Also just look on Google for the word scam or the word customer service issues, customer service problems, with whatever self-publisher you're interested in working with, and see what comes up. Okay, before we go to the next slide, I wanted to see if there were any questions. Feel free to, should be unmuting everyone now, so don't hesitate to ask a question or send me a question via chat. Okay, I have one quick question here about using bookstores. How can your book get into bookstores? We're gonna talk about that in a little bit more later, but generally use a distributor. I would say Lightning Source is the primary, or Ingram is the primary distributor for print-on-demand books, which is what your book's going to be in getting it into a bookstore.
Hi, Henry. I've got a comment.
Oh, sure. John, go ahead.
This is John Leake in Portland, Maine. I think you're right on with your comment and concerns about customer service. I've also worked with Lulu a lot over the last 6 or 7 years. And one thing I found with Lulu was that their customer service from time to time isn't good enough for my customers and readers. And so what I do with Lulu is order all the books myself and do my own fulfillment. And that way I can resolve some of the customer service issues. With Lulu, I found I've made hundreds of orders with them myself over the past 5 or 7 years. And I still have a 17% problem rate. 17% of my orders have problems. And that I just can't pass that along to my customers. So I just do all my own fulfillment. And that actually serves one of my other business objectives, which is developing relationships.